The natural realm teaches us about the spiritual realm so that we may be more effective in the natural realm. Barry, what do you think about them apples?
I think we better learn some more about the spiritual realm.
Okay, where am I going with this? There are things that we've been given, pictures, shadows, types of things on this earth that we are given in order to understand the spiritual realm. And in doing so, is in the understanding of that spiritual realm, it makes us more effective in our walk in this natural realm, and therefore doing our part to fulfill those words of your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens. Now, before we get into the actual picture that we're going to talk about today, is when we take these pictures, shadows, types, let's add the word allegories in here. If we take those to an extreme, we can become a bit on the ridiculous side. So understanding that these things are given to us so that it can enhance our understanding, but it needs to be within some boundaries. And with that, we introduced this week the third of the women. We had the harlot, we had the concubine, and now we have the bride. And Barry, could we say it? Here comes the bride.
Well, on the side of the ridiculous, we're not asking those who are male members of the bride to put on garments that pertain to women.
Yeah.
We need to show up at Shabbat in a white dress, guys. So let's not over apply an analogy here.
Yeah. Show up at my service with makeup, I may not let you in the door.
There's no question you're not coming in. The idea, Mike, that there is such a spiritual entity as the bride,
mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily, how do I say it? It's not necessarily overtly feminine in nature. It is more along the lines of a spouse. That is, that we are to show fidelity and share common bonds, share common goals,
mm-hmm.
Raise up a family of adherents together, to discuss visions and dreams together. You know, when a woman or a young lady has been proposed to, and she accepts the proposal here in America, at least in our culture, immediately she is dreaming of the wedding day. The groom-to-be is more apt to be dreaming of the honeymoon. But the wedding day is a one-day event, or rehearsals and so forth, a couple of days. The honeymoon can last a short period of time. When they come home, life begins. Somebody wrote a book very aptly entitled "After Every Wedding Comes a Marriage."
Yeah.
The marriage is not the wedding. The wedding is the celebration of the marriage covenant.
Yeah.
The honeymoon is the consummation of the marriage covenant. But as the old saying goes, honeymoon doesn't last forever. Honeymoon's over. Reality sets in. So that day-to-day routine. I remember when Laura and I got married many years ago. You realize this year's 40 years ago. 40 years.
41.
The day-to-day routine. I remember going back to work after we had come home, and the new status of my life was still a novel thing and an exciting thing. A few months into it, we'd had our first set of arguments over how we were going to do things. She has her set way. I had my preferences of ways. and we had to figure out how's this going to work. So when we come into a bride status with Messiah, that's after we've already decided I'm not going to follow the path of the harlot,
Mhm.
which is basically a religious only expression with him.
You're right.
I don't want to be a mere concubine, although that's an important role for many. I don't want to be a concubine. When you are the bride of Messiah, you have made a commitment. I am going to live by the Torah in this book, and I am going to seek to apply it and keep it and teach it to my family and to my future generations, to all that will listen and watch. I will walk it out and demonstrate it, and I seek to be faithful to it.
Mm-hmm.
Without that level of commitment, you take on some other marital role with the Messiah. Not everybody who believes in Messiah and has been born again is necessarily, and I don't mean to be judgmental or harsh here, but not everybody, according to this analogy, is actually considered the bride. Doesn't mean that they're dying and going to hell or something.
Yeah.
It's just not, they're not part of the bride.
You brought out two words. Okay, first of all is the word covenant. And therein is the line that we're probably going to go to a little bit. The other one is commitment. So covenant and commitment go along beside each other.
Yes.
Let's go back briefly and look at the concubine and the bride. Both of them have times of intimacy. Okay, so as you have experienced in the past, going back to a previous system, the presence of the Almighty is there, and you ask, "What are you doing here?" And He says, I go where I'm welcome. So the emotion, evidence of a reality of emotion in a room is not necessarily evidence of the bride in the room.
Say that again.
Evidence of emotion in the room is not necessarily evidence of the bride in the room. For you can have intimacy which comes forth in emotion, but yet it is still a concubine relationship. Did I make myself fairly clear?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of stirs the pot a bit. Go ahead.
Okay. You can have provision. So there can be blessing. Evidence of blessing in the room is not necessarily evidence of the bride in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a prosperity-based gospel that is working, but yet that does not prove bride status, because both the bride and the concubine have times of intimacy, times of emotions, and have times it has provision. The evidence of the bride in the room is based on the ketubah in the room. Without the ketubah in the room, you cannot have a bride in the room, because the bride is given her status by the acceptance of the ketubah of the marriage contract. Okay, two people today can be living together. They can call themselves married, but without, and let's take this into secular terms, I'm not saying I agree with, disagree with whatever the state licensing of marriage, okay, that's a different subject for a different time. But if two people can call themselves married, but unless they have a certificate of marriage, they're not. So the evidence for us of the bride in the room in a biblical manner is the acceptance of the covenant, the terms of the covenant, the terms given on Mount Sinai in the Torah and upheld by the prophets, the writings, the Messiah, and the disciples. Did I make that clear?
Yes.
So if you, one more statement. So if you're standing in a room and you hear these words, the Torah is done away with, that is not the room for the bride to hang out. The bride needs to find a different room.
Throughout Scripture, wherever we have a bride and concubine status being played out, more often than not, there is this competition and jealousy between the two. The concubine can produce children.
Mm-hmm.
The concubine, as you said, does have intimacy. But knowing that they lack the full bride status, they celebrate their opportunities of intimacy. Here we are talking about worship and the engagement of emotions and gifts of the Spirit, etc., that oftentimes are very heightened and very well promoted and encouraged. And the members of that setting of the concubine fully engage and fully embrace that. When the bride shows up in such a setting, she may wonder, or they may wonder, why doesn't this take place when it's our time? Where is our emotion,
Mm-hmm.
our heightened gifting? And the reality is, Mike, that's available to us, but it has been my experience that we have somehow relegated that to concubinage, and it's not fit for the bride.
Mm-hmm.
We're more distinguished, we're more proper in our relationship because we have this Torah Ketubah document, and we're more official. What that says is arrogance and pride.
Yeah.
The master, the husband, the bridegroom, our Messiah, wants to engage with as much celebratory, dare I say, emotional embracing and engagement with us as with other parts of the family. But if we are somehow saying that's part of the arena that we came out of that is offensive to us, we are allowing our past offenses, whatever they may be and whatever they may have been rooted in, to prevent us in our current place from really experiencing all that we were called out for. Yah did not call us out because we wanted less. We were saying, is this all there is? There's got to be more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the more includes not only the study and understanding of His Word, but also now that we have the foundation of His Word, it should be an increase of His presence and an increase of the embracing of it. And somehow the bride keeps turning around, looking at herself in the mirror in her bridal gown and saying, don't I look pretty because of how well I keep the Torah? And Yeshua, I think, would be saying, where is your affection and love for me?
Well, we talked numerous times about identity. And there is a possibility here that the problem, once again, is in our identity, is that when we accept the ketubah, and again, the ketubah is the words given through Moshe on Mount Sinai,
Yes.
the first 5 books of Scripture, which is the foundation. It is we could call it the marriage license, okay, the signing of the marriage license. When we accept that, we are to be walking in bride status, not concubine status. So it is possible. The problem is, once again, identity, in that the pride and arrogance is because of a false identity trying to prove our status instead of walking in our status. All right, let me kind of unpack that just a little bit. That this status change, if you would, from going from a concubine religious system to a bride status, is it possible that we are still trying to deal with the status change ourselves, not truly seeing ourselves as a bride, but looking at ourselves still as kind of a transitional state between the two?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Now, here's the kicker for this. It may come down to a lack of letting go of what was our past. That there's still some animosity, there's still some issues, there's the affection with the past that has not been embraced, or that is still being embraced. Affections of things of the past. So the concubine says, I want the intimacy, I want the provision, but I don't want you telling me how to do things. Whereas the bride says, I want the intimacy, the provision, and all that comes from those things, but I want to do it your way. I'm leaving my way at the door. You mentioned coming into a relationship, going from the wedding day to the wedding night to the honeymoon and to the marriage. All right. There's some things that are kind of common with all of those, with the transitions. Number one is, from which end do you squeeze the toothpaste? Number two, probably more first fights on this one than any other that there is. Does the toilet paper roll this way or that way? Now, I guarantee you there's people that are, yeah, I know which way it goes. I guarantee you there's people right now that are laughing going, that was our first argument. Okay. Because we all know. So here's the difference. The concubine sits there and says, how dare you tell me that the toilet paper goes on the roll with it going over? I want to do it my way. I want to do it the way I've always done it, and it goes the other way. See, the concubine refuses to submit herself to the ways of the bridegroom. The bride lovingly, with honor and respect, says, I now do it your way.
Yes.
Now, affections with the past. See, the concubine says, well, I want my own anniversary. I want my own holidays. Yeah, we're going there. I want my own ways of doing things. I don't want to do your festivals. I want to do what my family did. And my family did these things. So I'm going to continue to do those things instead of doing your things, which is the difference between Passover and Easter, is the difference between Sukkot and Christmas. Passover is a bride festival. Easter is a concubine festival. Sukkot is a bride festival. Christmas is a concubine festival. The reason many people are not walking in bride status fully is because they're doing the things of the bridegroom, but their passion is still in their concubine ways.
And they would then tell you, because he loves me and has demonstrated that love to me. Matter of fact, he shows up when we worship. He is approving of what we do.
Because, see, Barry, the concubine wants to make the relationship about themselves. The bride wants to make the relationship about the bridegroom.
I keep thinking about the raising of the children, Mike, that we train our children in whatever status that it is or whatever route that we seek to take. So we are raising our children to believe that he accepts us because he shows up. Therefore, what we are doing in our holidays and the meals that we set on the table with him, we believe that we can eat whatever we want as long as we're thankful for it. To express thanksgiving and ask him to put his blessing on it means it's acceptable to him. And we're to refuse nothing. Well, that's not what he said. The concubine has an issue of misinterpreting the language of the bridegroom because it's not based on the same foundation.
Mm-hmm.
The bridegroom is speaking from the foundation of the Torah. The concubine is speaking on writings they see separate from the Torah when they're not. The bride understands the language of the bridegroom is from the Torah, so therefore I will study his language so I can better understand what it is that he is saying.
Well, John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments. Somehow, see, the concubine wants to say, well, I can define those commandments and where they came from. I can say that, well, this list over here, when instead the only list that he would have been speaking of, in fact, he would have said, if you love me, keep my Devar, my Torah, the commandments given on Mount Sinai. That's there would not have been a Jew in the room that would not have said he's speaking about the law of Moshe, the law of Moses, the Torah of Moshe. Nobody when they read that book of Yochanan, John, the first time it came to that verse, there wasn't a single person that was confused about what that meant. The confusion is this: that the concubine desires to define the word in their own way. That verse of John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments, is a verse to the bride to define her relationship.
Yes.
If you love me, put the toilet paper on the right way.
The kingdom comes down to a toilet paper roll.
People are going to their bathrooms going, which way do I put it on?
The kingdom says. Anyway, one of the common things that has been made into a lot of storylines, movie lines, and so forth is how the bride wants to change the bridegroom.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can change him. A young girl is warned, he's no good, he's a problem, he's got these issues. Oh, I'll fix him. My love will change him. One of the 10 commandments, the first, actually the second of which is, I will have no other Elohim or gods before me. A literal translation of that is, I will not allow you to put the mask of your preferred God on my face and re-identify me to your preference and your understanding of who you want me to be. I am the same forever. I will not change to please you. That's his command. The concubine has robbed the face of the bridegroom from his Jewish culture, his Jewish language, Jewish perspective, his Jewish future, and has preferred a more European version of him that is more conducive to our culture, our westernized understanding of the world. To me personally, in 2001, that was the most earth-shattering, world-shaking, life-changing moment when I realized I had been preaching and declaring a westernized version of who the Messiah was, and had lost all the authenticity of who he really is because of the way that my eyes had been trained to see. So when my Greco-Roman Western eyesight was exchanged for a more Hebraic viewpoint, which I'm still learning to see through, I'm still adjusting the lens on that, Messiah became much more authentic. The bride has to come to the place where she accepts her husband for who he really is. And as the bride, she has become a part of his family. Hebrew culture is that the bride, or the father of the bridegroom, builds onto his house to create a place for his son and his bride to live with him. Yeshua says, in my Father's house there are many rooms. In other words, he is building on to his house a place for me and my bride. And there's room for all of us. There is a place of inclusion, but we become a part of his family. There is still, unfortunately, among the bride, a bit of anti-Semitic mindsets and attitudes that says, I'm willing to study the Torah, but I want to do it from an American vantage point. I want to study the Torah to see how it will improve my American life, as opposed to, and it applies to various cultures. Sure. Any culture can study the Torah and gain and learn and be improved and grow and become mature in it. I get that. I promote that. At the same time, it changes our worldview. It changes the perspective of how the kingdom looks to us. The kingdom is not coming to make America a better place again. Ultimately, I think America will be a better place in that day. But not because we are more adherent to American values and American Constitution, but rather because the shalom of Yeshua, the Messiah, will reign over the earth.
True.
So the bride, we need to accept the identity of who we are. Put your seat on your bridal gown, guys,
Yeah.
and honor him with walking as he walked.
See, the conflict here is still this identity crisis because of the conflict between the bride and the concubine. I think still affects our walk as we're transitioning into that bridal status. Let me give it to you like this: what the bride does out of love, the concubine considers legalistic.
Yeah.
Okay. So when the bride does something and can point to the verse and say, this is the verse that I'm using in order to fulfill my love for the bridegroom, the concubine says, no, that's legalistic. But now the bride can also take her place, become too familiar with her place with this bridal status, which becomes the wife. Okay. And there's the progression, the maturing of the relationship. So the bride can become proud, arrogant of her status, can also become complacent with her status, and actually enter into a place that I call the boring bride. That they look, the bride looks down upon the intimacy that the concubine has, and therefore becomes boring. Enter in, well, we don't need to worship. We don't have to have these times of worship because that's that other stuff that we came out of. We're just going to read the marriage contract. We're just going to gather together every week and we're going to read the marriage contract. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you a news flash. A man and a wife reading the marriage license does not produce children. Intimacy does.
Yes.
If you don't have intimacy in your relationship, which flows over into your congregation, don't be surprised when you have no new people there because you're not producing children.
Which will lead us in a segue to next week. What happens when it's not so much the bridegroom who is bored, but it is the bride who becomes distracted, sidelined, looking beyond the bonds and bounds of where she's at.
Yep.
So we're going, the original teaching I did was the bride, the concubine, and the harlot. We are adding another layer to this teaching. And ultimately, I want to redo this in video format and expand upon it in some areas. So this whole teaching will become renewed and refreshed at hopefully some near point in the future. Got a few other irons in the fire at the moment. We're going to get there.
Yep.
So, Mike,
let me give everybody a verse, as I'm going to be the stick in the mud, and every party needs a pooper, and that kind of thing. Yeah. April 1st is coming. This will be Friday. Let me give you a verse that will go out on my Facebook site for that, and that is out of the Complete Jewish Bible, Proverbs chapter 26, verse 18 and 19. Like a madman shooting deadly arrows and firebrands is one who deceives another and says, it was just a joke.
Just kidding. April Fools.
I know. Let's don't walk in the ways of the world, folks. Let's walk in the ways of the bridegroom.
Amen. Amen. And with that, we will see you again next week. Thank you for watching Foundations for Life, for sharing on your social media pages. for your comments. I'm sure that there are a few. We would love to hear them. So until next week, shalom, Mike.
Shalom, Barry.
In truth, then.